In the previous video, we discussed some special strategies for reading part 1. In this video, we're going to talk about some strategies that will help you in part 2 of the reading test. Okay, in reading part 2, reading to apply a diagram, where should you begin? This one is unique among the reading parts. On the left side of the screen, you won't have any message or article to read. Instead, you'll have a diagram. You'll have to approach this a little differently. But before we discuss that any further, what's the first thing you should do when you start reading part 2? Quickly preview the entire part. Here's an example to show you what I mean. First, there will always be a timer like this at the top of the screen. So I've got 9 minutes for this part. And how about the number of questions? Well, I've got 5 questions where I've got to fill in blanks in an email that corresponds to the diagram on the left. And then I've got another 3 questions about the text as a whole. So I've got a total of 9 minutes for 8 questions. But if I spend just over a minute on each question, that doesn't leave me much time to actually do any reading. Don't panic. As I mentioned earlier, you can approach this part a little differently, and you won't need to actually read the entire diagram. In fact, doing so might be a little tricky. Instead, let's focus on skimming. When you skim a passage of text, you read over it very quickly, keeping an eye out for the main ideas. Let's try to skim over the diagram. Remember that each diagram in reading part 2 will look a little different. Sometimes it may appear as a brochure, or a menu, or even a web page. In this case, it's basically a set of instructions. But regardless of how it's presented, you should start by skimming the top of the graphic. This typically gives you some general information. Here, I can see that this diagram is a set of food safety policies for some staff. So they probably work in a restaurant. Headings are also a great way of skimming for main ideas. In this case, I can see that the headings are about food temperature, food handling, food preparation, and hand washing. Each heading also has a number of smaller points that follow it. I can also quickly skim the email on the right. Remember that this email always references the diagram. In this example, I can tell that Dave is writing this email to Jennifer. So who are these people? Maybe I can find out. Now I'll look at the first sentence or two in each paragraph. First, Dave is thanking Jennifer for putting together the poster on policies. Aha! So Jennifer must have been the person who created the diagram. In the second paragraph, Dave is suggesting to reinforce the policy about hand washing. Okay, so from the context of this message, I can surmise that Jennifer and Dave are probably co-workers at this business. Alright, so just by quickly skimming the diagram and message, I've got a general idea of what this part is about. Now let's try a question from the first section. This is from the end of the first paragraph. In fact, I noticed just today someone leaving ice cream on the counter. This is a clear violation of the first, second, third, or fourth policy. Alright, back to the text. But where should I look for the answer? Well, this one looks fairly straightforward. If you leave ice cream on the counter, it melts. So maybe this question is about temperatures. Now, normally I would scan the diagram for words related to temperature. Scanning is when you look for keywords and specific pieces of information in the text. But I already know that the heading for the first policy says food temperature. Therefore, A is the correct answer. Okay, now let's look at the second section of questions. Remember that in reading part 2, the final 3 questions will always be about the text as a whole, including both the diagram and the email. Here's an example from this part. Why is Dave writing to Jennifer? To complain about a policy violation? To make some helpful suggestions? To suggest a new policy be added? To apologize for making a mistake? Okay, why don't we do a bit more scanning? This time, I'll scan the email for reasons why Dave is writing to Jennifer. Okay, Dave says he'd like to offer a few suggestions in the first paragraph. He repeats this again in the second paragraph. He also thanks Jennifer at the beginning and end of the message. Therefore, he's probably not complaining. He doesn't seem to be apologizing either. And there's no indication that he's suggesting a new policy be added. He's simply advising that the present policies be emphasized more. Therefore, B, to make some helpful suggestions, is the correct answer. In this video, we discussed a number of strategies that can prove very useful for reading part 2. Regardless of the topic of this part, there are some things that will always be the same. The time will be 9 minutes, you'll have 8 questions to answer, and the text will take the form of a diagram and a corresponding email. And remember that skimming and scanning can help you efficiently answer each question within the time limit. In the next video, we'll discuss some specific strategies for reading part 3, reading for information.